Welcome to our live web event. Today's topic is using SMS with RSA SecurID for two-factor authentication. A little bit of logistics before we get started. You should be able to see a little panel, a control panel for GoToMeeting. When you see it over there, there's a question panel. We're going to be taking questions during this event. There's a very large number of people registered, so please ask your questions. We'll try to get to all the questions if we can. If we can't get to your question, I assure you we'll get back to you afterwards. We have a log of all the questions. If you have any audio difficulties, go ahead and send a question to us or a chat, and we'll try to monitor that. We do have a separate monitoring station here. This event is being recorded, so we will give everybody a recording this event after the fact. The slide deck is not nearly as useful as the recording with the actual comments and the questions and answers, so we'll get everybody that. We're very pleased today to have Mark Rothert here. He's the president of MessageMedia US. He's an expert in this SMS space, and we announced our partnership with RSA, what is it, 2 months ago, Mark?
Yep.
About 2 months ago, and we have just been deluged with calls on this. So there's a lot of people who are interested in this topic. I won't get in the way of the presentation. If you have any questions, send them to us. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark. Over to you.
Thanks, Grover, and thanks everybody for joining us. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from. As Grover mentioned, my name's Mark. I'm the president of MessageMedia US. Just very briefly about MessageMedia, we're an enterprise SMS provider. We help companies all over the world achieve better business outcomes through the power of SMS. One way we do that is with two-factor authentication. As Grover mentioned, we're an RSA certified partner for SecurID, which is what we're going to talk about today. I wanted to start with a quick poll just to understand how familiar audience is with RSA, and particularly RSA SecurID. So I'm going to launch the poll now, basically asking if you are a current RSA SecurID customer. If you could just answer yes or no, and then that'll help us determine how much time to spend talking about SecurID itself as opposed to the SMS component.
So we've had about 50% of the people register a vote here. Go ahead and log your votes. We'll keep this open for a few more seconds. We'd really appreciate it if you would give your input, because it helps us to tailor the content to those people. So got 70% voted. Time for you guys to put your last votes in. We're going to call last call here in just a minute. The question is, are you a current RSA SecurID customer? It's a yes or no question. I'm going to close this out now. It looks like we got about 80%. There's probably a fair number of people, because some of these people register from very large companies, Mark, they may actually not know. So it's possible they don't know. So we're going to go ahead and close this poll out. Thank you for participation, Mark. I think we'll go ahead and close it.
So it looks like about half of you are current RSA SecurID customers. I assume that some of the 45% that answered no have perhaps used SecurID in the past. So now you can get the results
on your screen. Basically, like Mark said, a little over half is a SecurID customer. The other half are not. So, and again, this will be included in the presentation and the video when we send it out.
So let's spend a few minutes just talking about SecurID as a product, independent of the SMS component, just for those of you who are not familiar with SecurID. So basically, SecurID is a two-factor authentication system. It is the most popular two-factor authentication system in the market. I think RSA has about 70% market share. So, by far and away the market leader in two-factor authentication. And in a nutshell, just very simplistic terms, what SecurID does is allow you to authenticate a user using a second form of authentication. In this case, something you have, either a hardware key fob, a hardware token, or a soft token, or as we'll talk about later, an SMS token. Basically, the RSA Authentication Manager consists of a couple of pieces. There's a software agent that sits on your SSL VPN in your DMZ, which talks to the Authentication Manager appliance, which can either be a hardware appliance or a software virtual appliance that sits inside your network, and that authenticates the user and grants access to the internal server. So pretty straightforward, but very powerful layer of security for authenticating users. So one of the things that's interesting about SecurID is that there are a number of different form factors for authenticating users. The sort of most familiar form factor is probably the key fob, which is sort of the original form factor and the hardware card that you see there. These are the ones that many of us have probably carried around in the past. While they're probably the most familiar, they're probably not the most popular with users because you do have to, it is something physical that you have to carry around. RSA also offers a software token, which can either be used on your laptop or desktop computer or on your smartphone, and it can deliver the same token or generate the same token that you would find on a hardware fob, but over an existing computer or smart device. The other form factor, and the one that we're going to spend some time talking about today, is SMS. And so this is a technology that takes advantage of basically the hardware device that all of us carry around all day, every day anyway, and that's your cell phone. And this can be any cell phone. It doesn't have to be a smartphone. It can be a dumb phone or feature phone. The beauty of SMS is that it comes pre-installed on every cell phone sold anywhere in the world. So if you've got a workforce that's sort of a BYOD workforce, you don't control the type of cell phone. Not everybody has a smartphone. This is a form factor that's going to be pretty much universal, and it's probably the most user-friendly form factor, as we'll talk about. On the back end, there are a couple of options. As I mentioned on the previous slide, Authentication Manager can be purchased from RSA or an RSA distributor or reseller, either as a hardware appliance or now as a virtual appliance. The interesting thing about the typical RSA SecurID deployment, and for those of you, the 55% of you that are current RSA SecurID customers, this will probably resonate with you. The interesting thing about the typical deployment is that the typical RSA customer only deploys two-factor authentication to about 20% of their user base. And there are a couple of good reasons for this that we'll talk about in subsequent slides. But the net effect is that 80% of your users are left using only username and password for authentication. And so basically, as we all know, hackers are going to attack the weakest link in any organization. And in this case, that's going to be the 80% of your users that are still logging on with username and password. So while you've done a great job in protecting that 20%, you've got another 80% of your user base that oftentimes are accessing the same internal resources, but are doing so only via a username and password, and thus are leaving the organization vulnerable. And the goal with two-factor authentication, obviously to secure your organization, is really only fully realized when you can offer two-factor authentication to the entire user base. Fortunately, unfortunately, there are some shortcomings with hard and soft tokens. Fortunately, there's a solution in the form of SMS that we'll talk about in a subsequent slide. But first of all, just want to highlight some of the very good reasons why the typical organization only offers two-factor authentication to 20% of their workforce. The first one is cost. It can be expensive if you have a large workforce. Hard tokens, as those of you who are current SecurID customers will appreciate, cost $60 per user per year. And that can add up. If you've got a big workforce, that can be an expensive investment. And so you have to be judicious about which employees you're going to make that investment for. And obviously, if you've got temporary employees or contractors, it may not make sense to issue them a $60 per year hard token. Soft tokens are a little bit less expensive, but still $40 per user per year, which again can add up with a large workforce. So cost is a big one. The second one is management overhead. Every time you issue one of these tokens, whether a hard token or a soft token, you've got to manage that token and keep track of it. You've got to replace tokens that get lost. You've got to retire tokens when employees leave, and it can really add up to a big management headache. And so when companies are evaluating who to issue tokens to, the management overhead is often a consideration. As I mentioned, there are some solutions to these shortcomings that are solved with Authentication Manager 8, which is the latest release of SecurID product. The first one is what RSA calls ODA. ODA stands for On-Demand Authentication, and that's a one-time password that can be generated via SMS or email. So with ODA, you don't need a hard token or a soft token. Anyone with a phone number, a mobile phone number, or an email address can be issued a one-time password using the on-demand authentication functionality of Authentication Manager. The part that's new with Authentication Manager 8 is what RSA calls RBA, and that stands for Risk-Based Authentication. This is a feature that was borrowed from RSA's Adaptive Auth product. And basically, it's a risk engine that evaluates users based on login behaviors, device characteristics, IP geolocation, and other factors to assign a level of risk to the logon attempt. And based on the level of risk, RBA will generate a step-up challenge. And that step-up authentication challenge can be either an on-demand authentication, for example, an SMS or an email one-time password that the user has to enter, or it could be an additional something you know type authentication. So asking the user for mother's maiden name, that sort of thing. So the advantage of ODA and RBA with Authentication Manager 8 is that it allows you to use two-factor authentication with the rest of the user base, with that other 80%, without the time and expense and management overhead of having to issue all of those individuals their own hard or soft tokens. Here's a quick graphic just showing how the risk-based authentication engine works. Again, basically looking at a number of factors as the user logins and then making a determination if the user is logging in from their normal computer, normal IP address, it may just allow them to log in with username and password. If it's a new device, new location, if there's something unusual about the user behavior, then you'll get that step-up authentication challenge. So this is a really, this is a great feature that's been it was really popular with the Adaptive Auth product, and now it's been really popular with Authentication Manager 8. And of course, what makes RBA so powerful is the ability to use SMS to issue that second form of authentication, that one-time passcode. The benefits of SMS relative to the hard or soft token, and why we can now roll out, deploy SecurID to that other 80% of the user base. First of all, lower cost. So whereas a hard token license or a soft token license is either $60 or $40 per user per year, for the ODA RBA license, we're looking at only $20 one-time cost per user. So it's not an annual subscription, but it's just a one-time cost. And in addition to the lower cost, you've got lower management overhead. So it's a one-time passcode sent via an SMS. It's time-based, and so once the passcode is generated and sent to the user, and the time expires, that's it. There's nothing else to manage. There's nothing to issue. There's nothing to retire. So that's a big advantage of SMS relative to hard or soft tokens. And finally, the form factor. As we talked about, mobile phone is probably the most universal form factor there is. Everybody's got one. Everyone carries one around. It's with us at all times. You can use both smartphones and dumb phones. Any phone, any mobile phone that is SMS capable is going to be usable for SecurID and for two-factor authentication. So again, no need to worry about everybody being on an iPhone or an Android device. Any phone will work. And then finally, quick and easy rollout. As we'll talk about in the configuration section of this webinar, it's very straightforward to configure SMS for SecurID, and it's very easy to generate one-time passcodes via SMS. So all in all, makes for a better user experience. In terms of deploying SecurID with SMS, there are a couple of different options, and we've seen with customers sort of across the spectrum, from customers that want to use SMS sort of as a complement to hard and soft tokens and use it only with a specific part of their user base. And then we've seen others that have deployed it to the entire workforce. So we've got customers that have made the decision to, because of the cost and the lower management overhead arguments, have made the decision to switch entirely from hard or soft tokens to SMS. So that's certainly an option. But another option is to use SMS as a complement to hard or soft tokens, and to continue to issue hard or soft tokens to permanent employees, but to use SMS on-demand authentication for temporary employees or contractors, suppliers and partners, even customers. Another great thing about SMS, you can use it as an emergency access for temporarily misplaced tokens. So again, one of the shortcomings of the hard tokens is that they're easier to lose, easier to misplace. Unlike a mobile phone, we're not always conscious of having it with us, and so we may leave it at home from time to time. In that case, you can simply issue a temporary replacement pass token via SMS. So it's quite convenient for folks who have left their hard tokens at home. And then finally, one that's interesting is the business continuity option that's part of AM8, Authentication Manager 8. And this option allows you to buy a business continuity license, which is something that hopefully you'll never have to use. But if you do have a disaster and you need to put your business continuity plan in place, if you've got workers who normally log in from the at the office, and suddenly they have to log in from home because there's been a business disruption, you can use the business continuity option to instantly issue literally thousands of one-time passcodes to employees who suddenly have to log on from home. And this is something that the way the license works, basically you can use this one time every 6 months. So it's not a for everyday use, but when you do have that hopefully very rare business disruption, this is a great option for issuing temporary two-factor authentication. I want to shift gears now and just talk about configuring SMS for SecurID. One of the advantages that I mentioned earlier is that it is really straightforward to configure SMS for SecurID. We've got an implementation guide that was actually written in conjunction with the folks at RSA that walks you through the steps of configuring SMS for SecurID, and we'd be more than happy to share that with you via email after the webinar. It's also available on the RSA website. But basically, from a high level, how it works, as a user tries to authenticate to the network, they are prompted for a one-time passcode. The Authentication Manager appliance generates that one-time passcode, sends it to the SMS provider along with the mobile phone number the one-time passcode is to be sent to, and then the SMS provider, be it MessageMedia or another SMS provider, delivers that one-time passcode to the user's mobile device. The user uses that one-time passcode to log on and is thereby authenticated. So pretty straightforward at a high level. The configuration itself, you're going to need just a few parameters, which you can get from your SMS provider, basically username and password. You'll need a URL. You'll need to specify what the token code message looks like. And then once you have those parameters, you can basically go to the Authentication Manager interface, enable on-demand token codes using SMS service, so simply check a box. You'll need to choose the user attributes to provide the SMS destination via the drop-down menu. There's an optional country code option, which if you're a multinational and you want to specify a particular country code for sending, you can do that via drop-down. And then finally, you can select whether you want to send via HTTP or HTTPS. So really just a few options.
Okay, Mark, I know we said we're going to have questions at the end, but I've just had 5 people all at once asking how long does this process take? What's a typical deployment take while we're on this topic?
Sure. So assuming you've already got RSA SecurID installed and deployed, setting up SMS for SecurID is going to take a few minutes. And so we're just going to walk through the process here, and you'll see it's literally probably less than 10 clicks, drop-down menus, fields to fill out. There's a copy and paste string. It's the sort of thing that you could do probably, if we had a race, we could probably do it in less than 60 seconds, Grover.
Right. So it's fully wired into the RSA product. And
this is not a customization. This is a standard feature of SecurID that the administrator is simply enabling and then entering in a few details based on their SMS service provider.
Yeah, by the way, in addition to the 5 questions of people saying, how long does this take, I got 3 more people saying, why didn't we do this before? So keep going.
Right, sure. So a couple of drop-down menus, a couple of fields to fill out. There's a URL to enter, which again is going to come from your SMS provider. If you're using HTTPS, you'll import a certificate. There's a string that you'll enter, and again, this is available in our solutions guide. You can literally just copy and paste into the parameters dialog box. You'll need to enter your username and password, and that's pretty much it. Response code, response format, but really simple. All this is sort of spelled out in the solutions guide. To your question earlier, Grover, it's probably 10 or 12 fields to fill in, and they're all really straightforward. Either a checkbox, a drop-down menu, copy paste. From the solutions guide. So really straightforward process, really easy to get going. And then in terms of actually sending a token code via SMS, you'll simply go into the Authentication Manager admin portal. You'll make sure that the user that you want to send the token code to is enabled for ODA.
Sure.
Make sure that you've got their mobile phone entered, their mobile phone number entered, and then set up the parameters for sending the one-time passcode.
Sure.
So a really straightforward process. That's pretty much it. Obviously, if folks are having trouble getting set up, we're certainly, we can help with that. It's, it should be a pretty straightforward process, but we've got quite a bit of experience in this, and if there's any questions as folks are trying to integrate the SMS functionality, we can certainly help with that. So with that, Grover, I'm gonna pause and let's see if we've got some more questions.
Yeah, we got quite a few. So here's the first question: is this secure? That's I got like 3 versions of how secure is this?
Sure.
Is this secure?
Yep.
And the other specifically, is this considered secure by RSA?
Right. Exactly. I think that's the important point. This is not a MessageMedia hack, right? We did not sort of customize Authentication Manager to enable SMS. This is something that was developed by RSA. We and any other SMS provider that's certified to work with SecurID has been certified by RSA, been evaluated and certified by RSA, so it's considered secure by RSA. A couple of points specific to SMS that I think are important to point out. The first one is that with the key fob versus the form factor of a mobile phone, one of the great things about the mobile phone is that if you lose your mobile phone, you're going to be very aware of that. And you're going to be very aware of that very quickly, and so you can take steps to replace it. You can take steps to disable that mobile phone for two-factor authentication. On the other hand, for some of us that have been issued key fobs and maybe don't use them every day, it's very easy to misplace or lose that key fob and then not realize it for some time. So from that perspective, I think that's an added security benefit of SMS versus a hard token.
Okay, a parallel question to that is how does this compare with email? And I'll take that one if you don't
Sure.
mind. Which is that there have been several industrial analyses of email versus SMS. Email is considered to be less secure than SMS because email for password reset or tokens carries too much context. It usually arrives along the same channel as the actual login account.
Right.
SMS is considered far more secure by all the IT organizations simply because it shows up with no context.
Right.
The code shows up and you use it. It doesn't give the account name or anything else.
Well, the other problem, Grover, with email, because again, with
man in the middle, there's a million problems with email.
There's that, but a really practical one. So on-demand authentication, as we talked about, offers the option of sending that passcode either via SMS or email. Problem with email, very practical problem with email is the very service that you might be trying to authenticate to log into is your email account. And so if you're delivering that one-time password via email, that can be a problem.
Sure, very fair. Okay, so this sounds so great. Why not just deploy this for everybody? That's what the next question is.
Sure.
Why not just turn this on? Why not turn off soft tokens and use this instead?
Well, so Grover, I'm a little bit biased, and I would say absolutely go for it. I think SMS is the preeminent form factor. I think it's really easy to use. It's really easy to manage. The cost perspectives certainly argue in favor of SMS. A lot of companies, though, already have sort of a pre-installed user base with hard or soft tokens. You've got a lot of users who actually are quite comfortable using tokens. And so if you're in that sort of situation, then by all means, look at SMS as sort of a complementary solution to the hard or soft tokens, and you can certainly use both. The one scenario in which SMS will not work is if you've got users who are in an area operating in an environment where they have an internet connection, which would allow them to log into a VPN, but for whatever reason don't have a cell connection. So if you've got folks working in a hardened underground facility, for example, or a facility where cell phones aren't allowed, obviously SMS is not going to be a solution for those scenarios.
Sure. Okay, what's the failure rate? I got versions of how reliable is it, what's the typical delivery time, what's the failure rate. Yep. So what's the actual statistical answer as opposed to the common sense answer?
Right. So, well, first of all, Grover, it's not as black and white as that because it's going to depend on, and as a user, you've probably noticed this in your own sort of personal life using SMS. Sometimes you might get an SMS from your wife that arrives, a few hours after she sent it, right? And that happens. And the reason that happens is because there are different sort of quality of service standards between SMS providers, and that's part of what differentiates an enterprise SMS provider like MessageMedia from a consumer-grade SMS provider that you may have experienced in your personal life. So in our case, we have a 100% uptime guarantee for our SMS gateway. We've got multiple redundant networks to reach users' handsets. We're constantly pinging those different routes and picking the best, most sort of fastest, most reliable route to deliver messages. So it's really going to depend on your user. In our case, I would say, well upwards of 99.9% of messages are going to be delivered in a matter of seconds. And this is really important for two-factor authentication. Obviously, if your CEO is trying to log on to his corporate email account and he's having to wait for a one-time passcode to be delivered by SMS, that is an unacceptable solution. And that's why it's really important, in our opinion, to choose an SMS provider that's going to give you that reliability and speed of delivery that's going to make for an ideal user experience.
So what you're basically saying, it sounds like, because there are questions related to this, which is that in some cases people are using kind of casual grade, low SLA. They may not have confidence in SMS. You're saying that the whole point of deploying RSA with MessageMedia is that you have an enterprise grade backplane as opposed to consumer grade.
Exactly.
It's a different beast.
Right. It's one of those things that if you're not if you don't work with SMS on a daily basis, it seems pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You hit send and the message shows up on the recipient's handset. There's actually, as you can imagine, a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and there are great differences between different SMS providers' infrastructures, and that can make all the difference in the world in terms of reliability and speed of delivery.
Sure. Okay, so let's ask a few questions that have just come in. One of them is this different than what I could do? If I had a soft token before and I implemented this in the RSA solution, can I log into different systems, or is it the same systems I can log into with a soft token?
Same systems.
It's a replacement for the soft token.
Basically, yeah. All that's changing is the channel, right? The delivery channel of the token. So it's the same token. And as far as Authentication Manager is concerned, it's the same token, whether it's delivered via soft token or delivered via SMS.
Sure. I get some kind of complicated questions here, and I'm not going to repeat the questions, but I will basically say all kinds of questions about how do I authorize my users, how do I get their permission to send them SMSs. That's frankly really closer to like your legal department kind of questions for your employee base, your contractor base. But I will say that the limitations on SMS are far, far less.
Right.
Because the consumption people are using, some of the problems people have had historically with SMS services was they were signing up for news alerts and they were getting 500 a day and it was costing a lot of money. This is the kind of thing you get one a day, two a day.
And so we should probably have a separate webinar, Grover, on SMS compliance, because it is a topic unto itself. But the short answer is that there is a distinction between marketing messages and non-marketing messages. Clearly, this is a non-marketing message, and so that shouldn't be I can't imagine that would be an issue for any companies considering using SMS for two-factor authentication.
Sure. So I've got someone who's asking, and it makes sense. The question is, look, our users are already using smartphones with soft tokens. How is this different than that?
So there's a couple of differences. One, in terms of the user experience, it shouldn't be any different. The user is going to look at their phone. They're going to see a one-time passcode that is time-based, it's session-based. They'll enter that passcode, and they'll log on as normal. So from the user's experience, the only real difference is with SMS, they don't now have to download an app, right? They don't have to be using a specific phone with that app installed. So if they happen to be have a phone that is not compatible with the soft token app, or they prefer not to download another app, that's fine. They can still receive the token via the SMS functionality that's built into their phone. From the company's perspective, the big differences, again, are the cost and the management overhead. So it's going to be the soft token is going to cost $40 per user per year. With SMS, you pay one time for the ODA, the on-demand authentication license, which is $20 one-time cost, and then you don't have to pay that again the next year. So it's a big cost savings, and then the management overhead piece, which we talked about before, is also, it's going to be imperceptible to the user, but to the administrator, it's going to make a big difference.
Sure. So I got one more question, and then I got a whole bunch of questions about impact. Again, it looks like MessageMedia, our relationship with RSA. We'll get to that in a minute. But the biggest question we have here is this a good fit for overseas contractors, particularly compared to things like soft tokens?
Yep. So that's a great question, Grover, and it can be. It absolutely can be. Again, it's going to depend on your SMS provider. Not every SMS provider can deliver to every country. At MessageMedia, we deliver to every country on Earth. We've got multiple routes, so we can set you up with routes to any country where you have contractors operating. So absolutely, the experience shouldn't be any different than domestic workers.
Sure.
Now, that's not going to be true for every SMS provider. You may have a provider that only delivers domestically. In that case, you may need to supplement SMS with the soft token. Right.
And I've got a question here. Is SMS popular in developing countries?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, it's probably. Interestingly, in the U.S., we're a bit of a laggard, frankly, in SMS adoption. Other countries have been much more sort of at the forefront of SMS adoption. Europe was certainly ahead of the U.S., and then even in developing countries, SMS is absolutely taking off. So in terms of sort of user experience, I think you're going to find in developing countries, SMS is going to be very popular for two-factor authentication.
Right. I mean, there's all kinds of stories about goat herders and fishermen who figure out their markets, and they'll use their phone for a month using SMS only and never make a phone call.
And the important point about I'm not sure that the goat herder is going to need two-factor authentication, but you will have users in developing countries who will need two-factor authentication and who may not have a smartphone, particularly in lower-income countries. They may just have a feature phone. And again, that's the beauty of SMS, is that it's going to work on any cell phone, whether feature phone or smartphone.
Right. Okay. So now I got a whole 5 questions about what kind of company are we? What's our relationship with RSA? Why MessageMedia? It's kind of it sums down to why would you do this, and why don't I just there's all kinds of direct to SMS, email to SMS. Why don't I use that instead? Why would I use MessageMedia?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of reasons. One, we can talk about MessageMedia, and I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch for MessageMedia, but there is, I think we do distinguish ourselves in the areas that are particularly important for two-factor authentication. So we talked about reliability and speed of delivery, right? So it's absolutely critical that message is delivered every time and on time. And the only way you can do that is by having sort of best in the world infrastructure. We've got, as I mentioned, an intelligent routing system that routes your message over the fastest, most reliable route every time. That's something that other SMS providers don't offer. So to the extent that that's important to you, and I would argue that absolutely that should be the most important.
Yeah, there are a lot of domestic-only providers.
Right. So if sort of the speed of delivery and the reliability is important to you, which it should be with two-factor authentication, you're definitely going to want to look at a provider that offers an uptime guarantee, that has redundant routes, and has the intelligent routing system that we have. We've been around for 14 years. We were started in 2000. We have over 14,000 customers around the world of all sizes, Fortune 50 companies, as well as SMBs. So we've got a ton of experience doing this. We've got again, I think the best infrastructure in the business. We've got a great support model. We have a follow-the-sun 24/7 support model. So if you ever do have any problems, you just pick up the phone and call. You'll talk to somebody who's sitting right here in this office with us, Grover, who's very well educated, extremely competent. They'll answer your call on the first ring, and 9 times out of 10 they'll solve your problem right there on the first call. So that's another selling point. In terms of the relationship with RSA, again, we've been certified with RSA. We have a strong relationship with their sales team, with their sales engineers. So another benefit is if you do have a complex requirement, either if you're an existing RSA customer and you want to figure out how this is going to work with your existing RSA setup, or if you're a new RSA customer, if you're new to RSA, we work really closely with their sales team and their sales engineers, so we can come in with sort of a team-based approach, the RSA folks being the RSA experts and MessageMedia being the SMS experts.
Okay, I have quite a few questions about what this thing costs. I've got, is this a big budget impact, kind of thing. But what's it cost per message, and what's typical in a company?
Typically, so it's typically volume-based. so the more messages you send, the lower the rate. But in general, it's a few pennies a message, right? It's not going to be the cost of the SMS. Even if you're sending multiple SMS per user per day, it's not going to add up to more than a few dollars a year. So, so it's going to be a very cost-effective solution relative to the hardware tokens and the soft tokens. It's going to be, we'd say on average you're going to save about 60%, particularly if you're using hard tokens, maybe closer to 40% if you're using soft tokens over your legacy cost per user.
And you're not even counting in the additional savings from not having to make an extra support call.
Exactly.
Which many companies cost between $20, $25, and $50 a call.
Exactly. And that's a great thing about SMS, and it's a great thing about AM8, generally Authentication Manager 8, is that it is much more self-service. So the users can answer a lot of those questions themselves just via the interface. Sure.
So I've got one sort of stray question about people losing their phones and that sort of stuff, but that's where we come back to the previous discussion, I think, where SMS has already been certified as far more secure than like an email solution, because all you have is one end of the conversation. You don't have the account you were trying to log into, et cetera.
Yep. And the codes that are generated are time-based, so they do expire. So if you lose your phone, you don't have to worry about those codes being used again. The other thing that's, this is sort of a bit of a corner case, but if that seed algorithm is compromised, it's much easier. You don't have to go out and replace all of those hard token or even soft token devices. You can simply, you don't have to worry about that seed algorithm being changed. Really easy to just change the seed algorithm if it was compromised.
Sure. So there's this interesting business question here. Why would RSA do this since it cuts into the revenue? Why would they do this?
Right. Well, so I mean, there's, I do want to be, I want to be political about this, but I think, frankly, RSA realizes that, they're getting ahead of where the market is going. They're responding to customer demand. Customers are asking for this. Customers want this. Customers prefer it. Users prefer it to hard tokens, prefer it even to soft tokens. And as we talked about in terms of extending the power of two-factor authentication to that other 80% of the user base, this is the only way to do it. So from RSA's perspective, we're adding value to their customers. We're making their product more valuable with SMS. So it's,
in many cases, it's truly incremental revenue to them.
It can be. It absolutely can be, but it's also, it's one of those things that they just, they have to respond to the demands of their customers, and that's exactly what they're doing here, making their product just that much more powerful.
Sure. Okay, well, we've got a few questions here that are so configuration specific, it's almost like a security violation to ask them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we usually do here. If you're sitting in a room with 10 people in a conference room and you wish this was open mic, shoot us an email and we'll do it for you open mic. We'll just have a single session with you. Sure. We can see for the people who signed up. There are some companies that have got as many as 20 people signed up for this one event. If you need a private session, let us know. One of the nice things about talking to us is we don't have to go through all the different product options. We can just have a single discussion about using SMS for two-factor authentication, what the real-world stories are like, and we've got the experts to do it.
Yep. And Grover, if we need to, we can even, if it makes sense, we can bring in our RSA counterparts. And again, like I explained before, do sort of a tag team session where they can talk about RSA and SecurID, we can talk about the SMS component. We're happy to do that as well.
Sure. So I've got an interesting question on implementation. As you're aware, Mark, when you use the RSA token, soft token manager, or hard token manager, you put a PIN in for the soft tokens.
Right.
Does this obviate the need for the PIN? Or do they get the thing without putting a PIN in the first place? How does it work?
Right. Yeah. So you are simply receiving an SMS.
Right.
Which has the passcode, the one-time passcode that you need to
Sure, but on the origination end, when you asked for it,
yes, you logged in with your username, and then PIN, and just like normally you would have looked at your soft token or your hard token for that one-time passcode, you're just looking in a different place.
So you still use the PIN, but you use it when you ask to get an SMS, and then the token, instead of showing up in that little blue screen, it shows up on your phone.
Similar to the question that you asked before, Grover, I mean, the user experience, the only difference is they're looking in a different place for that passcode. Otherwise, the user login experience is going to be exactly the same.
Right. So the reason they have to have the PIN is because that's one of the levels of security.
Exactly.
Okay. Good enough.
Yep.
Okay. Well, folks, we promised we're going to keep this time. We've actually gone a little bit over the time we promised. This event has been recorded. Mark, thank you very much. This has been very helpful. You've taken something, other than the fact when you're talking about DMZs, you kept this out of the IT speak zone. So thank you very much for signing in and telling people how this works.
Well, Grover, thank you for moderating. Thanks to everybody for joining. I've just put up some contact details. Again, if you want to continue the conversation offline, I realize we probably didn't get to all of the questions. So if you want to continue the conversation offline, please feel free to reach out to either of our sales folks whose contact details are on the screen, and I'll leave this up for just a minute, or our pre-sales engineer, Alex Brzezinski. And again, if you've got technical questions about RSA that are a little bit more RSA specific, we can absolutely put you in touch with the right people at RSA to answer those questions. But again, thanks. Thank you, Grover. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Really glad you could be here today, and look forward to hopefully continuing the conversation offline.
Okay, thanks. We'll leave this up for just a minute. We're going to go to mute, but this session's basically over while people are writing down the phone numbers. Thank you very much for joining.